If you own an S2000 and you've been looking into installing an aftermarket bucket seat, you've probably heard of a company called PCI or Pro Car Innovations. PCI makes a slider seat rail that is designed to be incredibly strong and adjustable for a wide variety of side-mounted bucket seats. Ever since they released the revised version of this seat rail last year, I've been eager to get my hands on a set. Today, I'm going to share my thoughts on them. The seats arrived well packaged with all hardware necessary for assembly. As I unwrapped the side mounts, the sliders, and the base one at a time, I could not help but notice how strong and durable each component felt in my hands. The side mounts and base in particular were the beefiest that I've ever seen. Even the hardware was grade 10.9. The flimsiest part out of everything was the slider bar. And the reason the slider bar is so flimsy is so that it can be bent to fit the various positions of the PCI slider seat rails. In my opinion, it seems like PCI could have solved this issue in a more elegant way, but oh well. After unpacking everything, I immediately began assembling the seat rails and found myself struggling to figure out how to get started. The included papers showed the assembled seat rails, but made it difficult to understand where the sliders should be placed, how to get the hardware in place, and how the slider bar should be installed. This was not my first rodeo, and it took me over an hour just to get the seat rail assembled. I was a bit disappointed by the assembly experience and reached out to PCI to provide some feedback. PCI agreed that the instructions needed to be improved and assured me that they were working on it. After assembling the seat rails, I mounted my DIYGuys 3 to the side mounts. I ended up using the third slot on the front and rear of the side mounts to mount my seat, and I could have gone even lower thanks to the additional clearance added in this revised version of the slider seat rail. Previous versions of the PCI slider seat rails had a base that was shaped like a cross, and that limited how low the seats could be mounted. This revised version allows the seat to hit the floor, because clearance has been added towards the rear of the base, where the lowest point of the seat rests. It is refreshing to see a company iterating on their products based on feedback from their customers. When it came to installation, bolting up the mounted DIYGuys 3 was an absolute breeze due to the single-piece design of the PCI slider seat rails. The base lined up with the OEM bolt holes without issue, and there was no fiddling required to line up anything. The only clearance issue I had was where the seatbelt mounted to the frame of the car. It looks like the base was intentionally crafted in order to add clearance for the seatbelt, but it was still pinched more than I'd like. Once installed, the PCI slider seat rails operate exactly as you would expect them to. When you want to adjust the position of the seat, you can simply lift up on the slider bar and the sliders will glide in the direction that you push. When it comes to driving, the seat rails keep the seat planted firmly in place, thanks to the extremely beefy side mounts. During this past weekend, I drove 500 miles and spent roughly 3 hours on track at Thunderhill Raceway and had complete confidence in these seat rails. When I think of the purpose of bucket seats and seat rails, the first thing that comes to mind is safety. They give you lateral support and keep you in place. They lower the seating position so that your noggin has clearance during a rollover situation, and they allow for safety harnesses to be installed. After having spent a month with the PCI slider seat rail, I feel confident that they are one of the safest aftermarket seat rails for the Honda S2000 by a significant margin. Are they overkill? Maybe. Are they the heaviest seat rails on the market, weighing in at 14 pounds and 13 ounces? Probably. But $300 feels like a reasonable price to pay for peace of mind in a seat rail landscape where shoddy welds have broken and flimsy seatbelt brackets have bent. With some minor improvements to the seat rails and some major improvements to the installation instructions, the PCI slider seat rail could be the best aftermarket seat rail on the market today.